A little whisper in your ear or a huge crash down to earth, a lesson in love is life's way of nudging you in a new direction. Welcome to the Lessons in Love podcast with me, Carly Ann. I'm a self-esteem and relationship coach, and I wholeheartedly believe I am here to help you break through the very relationship struggles that so many of us face. Through my own personal experiences and other people's inspiring lessons, I am showing you that we can change and we can break free from toxic patterns in love. Inside this podcast, you are going to hear what has shaped successful love stories and healed heartbreak. I want you to know you are not alone, you are not crazy, you are not too much. This space is for the woman who is done with believing she needs someone else to be whole, the one who has had enough of not feeling enough, who is not willing to let her past steal any more of her future, who is waving goodbye to a fantasy relationship and hello to the healthy, extraordinary love she deserves. This is where you learn how to become the most secure and irreplaceable version of yourself. Hello, everyone. Welcome back to Lessons in Love. Today, I get the opportunity to share with you a conversation between myself and my good friend and fellow relationship coach, Caitlin, otherwise known as the Compatibility Coach. Caitlin is a love and relationship expert who helps amazing women ditch the heartbreak of dating emotionally unavailable partners so they finally get the relationship they deserve. She's determined to help women stop questioning their worth, feeling not enough, and chasing partners who can't commit. Caitlin's unique 5-step formula helps you overcome self-doubt, anxiety, and waiting to be chosen, so you can break away from toxic relationship patterns and navigate modern dating with ease, confidence, and hope. There's a few things I love about this episode. When I was writing out like the different topics we spoke about, it really covers so much, and I adore that for a single podcast episode. That's exactly what I want for Lessons in Love, that you can come to an episode and just get loads of juiciness and golden nuggets to take away. But today, the things that really stand out for me is that we are discussing lessons in becoming compatible with yourself first. We dive into avoidant attachment and how to stop looking for reasons things won't work out with someone. I have talked a lot about anxious attachment on this podcast, and sure, we've mentioned avoidant along the way naturally, but not in this way. So I really love that. We talk about letting go of desperation so that you can surrender and trust what is next, because I know that's something people can really, really struggle with. So I hope that you love this episode as much as I do. Let me know, as usual, when you are listening to this podcast. I would love to hear the parts that you love too, the parts that, you take away, because it's always just really useful for me to know. And you can do that. The easiest way to get in contact with me and just, let me know about yourself is through my Instagram. So that is carly.ann_. And you can get that in the bio as well. But yeah, let me know when you're listening, because it just makes my day, to be honest. Caitlin, hello.
Hello, how are you?
I'm good. How are you?
Yeah, I'm very well, thank you. Lovely to see you on screen as usual.
We've seen each other face to face now.
I know, a few times. I feel like our relationship blossomed over lockdown, virtually.
It's so funny. I was thinking about this because it is different doing it with you. You've crossed into that friend boundary now. You're in the friend zone now. Not
Oh no, it means you're going to be able to tell when I'm bullshitting or something on this.
I do always like to start the podcast of just telling you
Yes.
what I love about you.
Oh.
Do you know what it is? Apart from the fact that I do consider you a friend now.
Yeah.
Your whole approach because we do quite similar work, and
yes, we do.
I've had that many guests on the show where we do such similar work, but whereas the way that you deliver it, present it is actually in that no bullshit way, I feel like. Obviously we've worked together, so I'm a little bit biased as well. But I just think if people
Thank
go onto
you.
your page, if they watch what you do, it's really clear that you're coming from experience. Like
Mm.
we've got a lot of crossovers and similarities, but also a lot of differences. Yeah, I just appreciate watching that and the fact that you're open to sharing it, because it's not easy to share that stuff.
Thank you. And yeah, I think that was like a big part actually of one of the reasons why I love doing what I do, is actually so women feel less alone. So I think when you feel like you're basically failing in love, it can be one of the loneliest places on the planet to be, because you're also surrounded probably by happy couple friends, or people getting engaged or having babies, or getting out of one relationship and jumping into the next, and it's all amazing. So I do feel like love is one of the areas where people feel most like a failure and most alone. So
Yeah.
I think that's probably why I always kind of jump in and, talk about what I used to be like. And, the fact that we even can have conversations like this and share our own experiences is amazing.
Yeah, exactly. So tell us what it is that you do.
God, so I tend to work with women usually, and usually single women. I'd say probably about 70-80% are single, but very successful. If you looked at their life, you'd think it was amazing and perfect. But when it comes to love, it feels hard. And usually the pattern is that they're attracted to emotionally unavailable partners. So we kind of help break that cycle of feeling not enough or too much or unlovable, so they really can step into their power and feel worthy and focus on themselves, and then kind of eventually also figure out who they're compatible with and kind of become their own matchmaker. So we sort of heal what's keeping them stuck, and then kind of actually get them thinking about who they would love to be with and what they would kind of deserve to have.
Honestly, I know I say this to you all the time. You articulate yourself so well. I wish you could pass that on to me.
Yeah, but I was saying that and thinking, I was like, don't know if this makes sense or what's
It
coming out of my
makes
mouth.
so much sense. Yes, absolutely, it makes sense. Tell us about your love story.
God, my love story. So my love story has changed so dramatically throughout my kind of teens and 20s to where I am now. So I think love to me was always kind of quite self-destructive. It was always romantic love. It was always self-destructive. It was always kind of anxiety making and obsessive and chasing that person that you couldn't have and trying to force it to work out when it wasn't going anywhere. So I kind of always associated love with hardship and quite a bit of pain, really. I think it was, I was never somebody who thought I would really have a boyfriend or thought I would get married or thought I would kind of have a happy ever after. So that was my story for so many years. And of course, me feeling like that just exasperated what a disaster my love life actually used to be like. Because, of course, it goes back to that thing, what you kind of think and what you say to yourself is who you are and what you do and what you see. So I think that it was really only when I got to a point where I said enough was enough and I actively started to try and change my love story that it really became less about romantic love and about the sort of dark obsession and more about just bringing so much more self-love into my life and joy and friends and family and focusing on what I kind of already had, which is where kind of ironically, actually, I sort of figured out who the love of my life was. And when I let myself fall in love with somebody who was good for me and who I actually liked and who I could see a future with, it kind of changed in an instant. So yeah, love now I think is, God, I don't even know how to describe it. I think my love story now is still changing, even though I am engaged. I'm getting married in 5 weeks today. But yeah, I think love to me now is, it feels like it's coming home, but it's safe, but it's also exciting. I think it requires a vulnerability and a resilience that I wasn't always sure I had. It requires understanding and acceptance and being able to be in a partnership so you can kind of stand up and face the world together.
So what's the guidance, I guess, on, and I'm sure you've thought about this, on this idea, not the idea, the truth, the fact that the love of your life, the person you're marrying, turned out to be in front of you. Is that
Yes,
something that's a rarity? Do you believe that that's the case for people, that actually their eyes aren't open? And I'm just curious about that.
Well, no, you're right. And to be honest, this isn't, actually, it's really good to talk about it because it's not something I usually talk about or admit because I was such a horrible person. Well, I didn't treat the person I am marrying very well for a bit of time because I was so unsure in myself. So me and my fiance actually kind of, I guess, saw each other off and on for about a year. And he was always very sure of me. And I was very much, oh, he's texting me when he says he's going to. Oh, he likes me. Oh, no, this is just not for me. No, he's not right. No, he's too stable. I'm a party girl, blah, blah, blah. So I sort of dismissed it. And I think I kind of kept him at arm's length for quite a while. And I'm sure you probably you'll resonate with this, and so will a lot of your listeners. But I looked for reasons why it wouldn't work. You look with the guys who are good for you and the people who it could actually work with. I think when you're quite emotionally unavailable, you look for reasons why it won't work with them, and then the guys who treat you badly, you try and find reasons to stay. So because that was my pattern, when he was standing in front of me, I just couldn't see it. I couldn't see how compatible we were. I couldn't see what it would be like to be in a relationship with him. So I think it was only when I started doing the work, and by that I mean I stopped dating, I came off of the apps, I got quiet, I looked at what my own issues were, I looked at what happened in kind of childhood, and I really tried to heal a lot and figure out who I was so I could, you've got to get compatible with yourself before you can, figure out who you're compatible with elsewhere. But it was only in that space where when I got quiet and when I stopped, and the more I kind of got to know myself and fell in love with learning about myself, there was always this voice in the back of my head saying, there is something, you're making a mistake. Like I couldn't sleep, I couldn't stop thinking about it. I cornered my best mate and was like, I don't know what to do. And she's like, have you ever just thought you've never dated anyone normal? So and I was like,
oh, I love you for this.
But it was true. And it was kind of at that point where I was like, okay, so we composed a text that, I was going to send him to ask him out. So I had to do a lot of proving. But when I was in and I was secure enough in myself to give it a proper shot, it was instant. Within a year we were living together and engaged, but I had to let myself, and had to become secure, but I had to let myself fall in love.
I am so happy you shared that, because as you were sharing it, I was thinking, I don't know if I've had that side of things on the podcast. We've had the anxious, the chasing the unavailable, but I don't think we've spoken so much about that side of things.
Yeah.
It's so interesting. I know I've got that avoidant side, but I've always paid attention to the anxious side. So a lot of the work I've done, people can find me saying, I'm so anxious, so anxious. And actually, the last sort of 6 months to a year, I've started to be like, oh shit, there's a lot of avoidant tendencies.
Yeah.
I've done a lot of healing around the anxiety, and unless I do the healing around the avoidance, everything that you've just said, it's going to continue. And now I find myself in this stage where, firstly, I haven't met my person, so that's just the way it is well. But also, I know I had this, I've probably told you already, to be honest with you. And I think I've shared a lot about when I had these two people. One was into me, and the other one was just classic avoidant. My therapist said to me, what's the difference between the two and me? And it was the one that was into me or liked me, give me attention. Yeah, it was like the ick, to be honest. I hate
Yeah,
saying, I'm not saying that's what you had by any means, but it was certainly like I could easily set a boundary with him. I could
yeah.
easily, oh yeah. And I also remember this other guy who was really into me, and my friend said to me, and this sounds awful, but hopefully, you know what, we've put it out there now, and hopefully it means people will relate to it. But I remember my friend saying to me, okay, now that she could see that I was starting to get to that stage where when
Mm,
he texted me, I was like,
mm,
my friend said to me, she said, you've got, and this was probably, it was before, way before COVID, because I remember that's when I was seeing him. And she said, you've got to not, like, don't be mean to him now, just because you're starting
yeah,
to get to this stage. Like, don't be mean. Not like
yeah.
literally a horrible person, but you know how you can just start to be like,
Be
why
a
you,
bit dismissive, can't you? But
yeah,
I just think the irony is like what he was texting you and how much he was texting, he probably wasn't too keen. He was just a normal person.
I
Whereas
know.
like you're so used to like people who,
People who like say they're secure and they're like texting you that normal amount, and
yeah,
that turns you off. Then you've got people who are yeah, they are that other side. They are
yeah,
perhaps anxious themselves, let's
mm,
say, for just possibility, and that then is like even more terrifying, even more like get out of my space. Like
yeah,
that's what I struggle with that sometimes, because I'm like, I've got anxious tendencies. I know
mm,
that. I know I need someone who's going to hold space for that, because you know that's the way it is. On the flip side, if someone's anxious with me, I become so avoidant, and it's like
yeah,
not hypocritical because it's trauma and it's a trauma
mm,
response, but on paper it's hypocritical.
yeah. But it's true, isn't it? I think it's, and that's why I think like the attachment kind of tendencies are so important, but there is so much fluidity because your attachment style can change depending on who you're with. And I think my fiance was always very secure in how he felt, but I think I always knew deep down. Like I remember saying to him at one point, like, yeah, I can see us getting married, but just like not now. You know, I knew it was almost like I just knew all along he was my person, but I was just so, I don't want to say messed up, but like I was so, I guess, confused or just didn't know myself that I was almost sort of self-destructing as I went. But yeah, it's weird, isn't it, how we do that? And I do think we've been almost conditioned by society to like, you know, the goal is almost being chosen, isn't it? So when somebody pulls
Oh,
away, yeah,
that's my inner child's goal. My
yeah,
hurt self
yeah,
doesn't
yeah.
want
You're like,
anything else.
your hurt self is like, I need to be chosen, and you know, and sort of loved. So when somebody pulls away, we chase them because it protects our self-worth, because our self-worth is so wrapped up in them choosing us. So it's such a vicious cycle.
So a question for you, not one of the
Hmm.
questions.
The questions.
Do you still see or feel sometimes those avoidant tendencies coming out?
Do you know what? That's so interesting. Oh, I've really got to think about this. No, I think there's still a place that I go to in my head. Well, I think it was during the first lockdown. Things were like so up in the air with like getting married and stuff like that. And like I made up this weird argument in my head. You know, my fiance doesn't want to talk about things. That means we're never going to talk about things. That means, you know, we're gonna be 20 years down the line and I'm gonna be standing there in the kitchen and he's gonna be doing this. And I was like really weirdly like passive aggressive and grumpy for a few days until he was like, what is wrong with you? And it all sort of came out and he was like, hang on a minute, when have I ever not wanted to talk about stuff? Like, when have I ever walked away? When have I ever done this? It's like, you know, you've been the one who's been sort of weirdly avoiding me for a few days. So I don't know what that is. I don't know whether that's, it was almost I built up this weird anxiety in my head, but it was also like avoiding how I was feeling and kind of numbing out by almost creating a fake scenario that just wasn't true. So it's a bit of an odd one, isn't it?
Yeah, and I guess that's why I asked, because I know, so certainly in a relationship,
Mm,
that's for me, it's more anxious.
mm,
And I know that it's something that will still come up.
mm.
You know, it will just be more healing in a relationship
Yeah,
and things like that.
yeah.
And it's no, I guess it's no different, is it, when you have, if you have those sort of avoidant tendencies of
Mm,
someone wanting to be vulnerable or close or let you in and all
yeah.
those things. So just out of curiosity, but it's so interesting that he came to you to have that conversation.
Well, no, I think I was like, oh, I think we need to talk about something later. And he was like, well, I don't want to talk about it later now. You've said that. What is wrong with you? So he was like, where are you going? But no, I think he is an amazing person. I think I still have a tendency to shut down, probably less with him, but more something happens with family, something like that. My reaction is kind of like shutters it down. I step back. I can kind of, you feel like you can kind of emotionally detach yourself a bit. So I'd say maybe it still plays out in other areas of my life. But I know we talked about this before, but I love what you just said there, which was like, you still heal in relationships. And I've just had to have such a big thing with one of my clients because we've been doing all this work in inverted commas, but she's like, oh, I'm not ready today. I'm not healed. I'm not this. I'm not that. And it's like, you don't have to be healed in inverted commas again to love or for somebody to love you. Like there's no end goal here. Like so even that situation that I described there, which was like, a weird sort of mental argument I was having in my head, that was still me learning to trust that he was going to want to talk and listen. And that was me learning to trust again. So even though, I trust him kind of 1,000%, there's always still a little bit more that you
Always.
learn and that you have to do.
Yeah, it is never ending. They say it's never ending, and it's
Yeah.
true. And I do think it's so hard, isn't it? Because on the one hand, I think there is elements where it's easier to do the work when you're single, the work,
Yeah.
but ultimately you're gonna have to do the work. It's what we call it now, but even when you
I
say
know.
it,
I
it's a little bit
don't
odd.
even know what it means.
Yeah. But you're still gonna have to do it in relationships, and it's like
Yeah.
you're gonna have to do it next time you experience rejection, and next time
Mm.
you experience heartbreak, and next time
Mm.
you make up a story in your head, and next time I
Mm.
experience anxiety. We're gonna have to do the work, and
Yeah.
that's it. There is no situation really.
No,
Maybe
it's
a
real.
week when you get to go on holiday to a festival and shut off, but
Yeah, and I think it is an interesting one because I think we have to stop seeing the getting into the relationship bit as your story ends,
yes,
because that's where so much of like the learning is. Like I had to learn to be in a relationship. I had to learn to be in a partnership. Couldn't just all be about me and what I wanted to do anymore. Like even the tiny things about like, if you haven't got keys to someone's flat, you can't rock up at like 2 o'clock in the morning and expect them to like be awake and let you in. It sounds so silly, but you do have to learn to face the world with someone.
it's true, isn't it? Because I guess a lot of the work that we do is with people who are dating, and so often at
Mm,
those early stages of dating, trying to make it's just mad when I say it, but like trying to make this person the one, whether they are right
yeah.
for each other or not. Like this next person I'm going on a date with, or this next person I fancy has to be
Mm,
the one. And it's like, no, people don't look past like
yeah.
what is involved in a relationship. So imagine if you are getting that anxious or that avoidant in the dating phase, times it by 100 in the relationship,
Yeah.
you know.
Yeah. And I do think like with clients, a lot of the time, especially kind of in the early stages of coaching, we almost have to take getting the relationship and the dating off the table for a little bit
Mhm.
because, it should be about whether you're happy and having a good time. And if you're fixated on an end result, you miss everything that happens in the process. Like it's the difference of the fixed mindset versus the growth mindset that they talk about a lot in business. Like you have to learn to apply those sort of tools and strategies to your love life. Because if you fully trusted that you were going to meet somebody, if I could give you 100% guarantee that you didn't know when, you didn't know where, you didn't know who, you didn't know what it would look like, but you would find your person and you can stop worrying, how would you show up in the meantime?
Exactly. And I don't know why this is coming to my head. Maybe it's a link in there, maybe if I listen
Mm.
back. And I know it's a little bit morbid, but the other
Mm.
thing is, and this is where I get a lot of the surrender and a lot of just freedom in being single and all of those things is you also just can't give me certainty about my life, and that I'm going to be here next week or in a year or 10 years. And I just think I'm not going to spend it not wasting it, but desperate over someone who doesn't see me or that I don't know yet.
Yeah.
If our paths cross, they'll cross, but I can't stand the thought of like losing my life, because I know that on that last day, if I was giving the opportunity to say, I'm not going to be like, my only regret is that so and so still doesn't like me. That's not going to be my regret. It's going to be that I spent the last 3 years thinking about them.
I know. It's odd, isn't it? Like how much energy we kind of waste. Like I had a client, we've just sort of started working together, but she had been dating somebody for a couple of months and she was miserable. Like, the dates were great, like an hour every week or so, but the energy she was expending in between on being anxious and not really being happy because he wasn't communicating at all, and it just wasn't quite right, and all that sort of stuff. Like, and even now, when she knew she had to end it, the amount of energy she's spending feeling not enough or being heartbroken about something that works out that she wasn't really sure about anyway. Think about what else you could channel that into.
That's it, isn't it? And even those moments where I feel like I'm not enough, or I have that feeling of just like really feeling low,
Yeah.
I just have to remind myself in those moments, it's never, my mind doesn't really go there anymore, that it's never about the fact that I'm single or not in a, it can't
No,
be about that.
no.
It's not about that. That's just the surface crap, really, that you put it down to
Yeah.
most.
Yeah, and I do think that those feelings of like not being enough or not being X, Y, and Z, they don't go away because you get into a relationship. It just moves to a different area of your life. Like I still have to do some of the same stuff about in the kind of work arena. You still have to like remind yourself and kind of train your brain in a different area of life.
100%. The skills, I suppose, the skills that you can learn around this are skills you're going to take elsewhere anyway. But
Yeah, I think that's why as well. I don't know if you find this, but my clients, like, whilst we're focusing on the love element, or the dating element or the relationship element or whatever, like it usually happens that they have big shifts in other area of their life as well. Like they'll move to a different city, or they'll get a new job, or they'll relationships with family and friends will suddenly get much better. Yeah, you don't just focus on one area in your life in isolation, do you?
I am so proud to tell you this episode is sponsored by the Happiness Planner. This brand is one I have used personally for years. In fact, it is one of the very first journals I found when I started out on my own happiness journey. They offer a range of planners, journals, and different resources to help you on your journey of self-discovery. Their mission is in helping you gain awareness of self and of others, heal from past traumas, master your thoughts, emotional and behavioral patterns, and create a life where you feel happy, whole, and fulfilled. Now, if you know me and the work that I do, you will know how aligned that is with my own vision. So you can head to their website, thehappinessplanner.co.uk, to check them out. And you can use the discount code Lessons in Love, which will give you 10% off all of their amazing products. So you kind of already answered this one at the beginning, but I'll ask it just in case they're slightly different. So I think what you answered is what love means to you now.
Yeah.
Or no, how it's changed, sorry. So if you had to sum up what love is, how do you tend to see that?
I think it probably would just be what I said at the beginning. Like love for me is everything. It can't just be one thing in isolation. I think if we're talking about romantic love, it is being able to stand next to somebody and say, okay, we're a partnership. We're gonna build a life here. Like, I trust you being vulnerable. I'm resilient enough to shoulder whatever you've got. It's safe and it's exciting and it's terrifying, but I don't know, it's just kind of, it feels like coming home to me. And I think that's the difference with my fiance. Like, once I let myself relax, and once I let myself sort of trust him and lean in towards that intuition, it was effortless. It wasn't, of course there was still like bumps along the way, and as I said, a lot of learning on my part, but it wasn't a constant battle. I didn't feel like I was pushing a boulder uphill, or I didn't have the anxiety and the whatever that had sort of always shaped everything in the past. And I think, again, we can't take romantic love just in isolation. Like, it is, you can't reject like love that comes from friendship or family or society or being kind to people just because you're focused so much on romantic love. So yeah, it kind of means everything to me.
How do you know when you are being vulnerable? Perhaps like with your fiance. How do you know when you're being vulnerable?
I get really uncomfortable. My heart races.
Does it?
Even now, I think it's still.
What's it, the fear of for you?
I remember when I was the first one to say I love you, and I was literally like, it sort of came out. But I think now I guess it's the feeling is a lot less apparent. But I guess there is always still a tiny bit of fear of being rejected, or fear of expressing something and the other person not honoring it or helping or understanding, which ultimately kind of is rejection. It's still, probably, if you go back to the root cause, it's probably still fear of not being chosen, not being enough, or being left, or kind of and that sort of thing. So it comes up very rarely and in a much more diluted form. But if you wanted to sort of trace it back, it probably still goes back to there. But again, it's learning, isn't it? It's building, it's practicing.
And I know, like, you know, it's your fiance, but it doesn't take being vulnerable away if it's something you haven't done, like, for most of your life. And
yeah, definitely.
I was actually writing a post today because, you would get inspired by our real. I'll update you off the.
Yes, I love hearing about your dating stories.
But I was messaging someone, and I noticed that I was going to say something just like quite, it's not that personal probably to the natural person or normal person. I don't know what I mean by that. I'm a normal person, but what am I trying to say to the average person? Anyway, so I was messaging them this comment. I guess it was vulnerable in the sense of it was something personal about my life that's going on. And I knew I didn't want to send it because what it is I usually play the role of therapist.
Yeah.
I'm usually the one that will take care of you, and that's the role I naturally go into. And so I noticed that I didn't want to send this. And I noticed that I thought, are they just going to think that I'm a victim? Are they going to think, oh my God, what a whiner? Like all of these things. But it's okay if they do it,
Yeah.
I just thought, you've got to send this. If they do think any of those things, goodbye.
Yeah.
It was nice messaging you. Like, if they can't handle a little bit of that, I didn't so much get the vulnerability hangover. It was more of a pre-vulnerability thing. But I was like, just sod it. Like, no.
Send it. Yeah. I think with all clients, like especially the ones who tend to veer more on the either avoidant or have a lot of self-protection in there, you have to practice being vulnerable. And actually a lot of the time dating isn't necessarily the space to start, or love or relationships. Like one client last week, her practice, one of her practices, one of her sort of action points was she had to ask somebody for help, either in a work sense, or I think she actually ended up asking a neighbour to bring her some groceries because she was isolating. So it's tiny little steps to kind of almost build that trust that you will be okay and it is all right to share things or to ask for help, or to be, because ultimately you need to trust that you can rely on somebody.
100%. 100%.
Somebody in.
Because I think we focus a lot on like reliability, but I don't know how much we do like actually go out and practice it. We're like, I want someone that I can rely on. It's going to be this, it's going to be that. And it's like, well, have you tried relying on someone?
Yeah. And it's always the people who seem the most reliable that can never actually rely on anyone. I had a client once when I said, well, what's your dream relationship? And she was like, you're two completely independent people who like have a nice relationship but don't rely on each other. And I was like, well, I mean, good luck trying to get that, because it's not going to happen. Like, you can't. Of course you should maintain your independence, but if you're serious about wanting to meet somebody to potentially spend the rest of your life with, you need somebody who you trust enough who can sort of hold you when you fall down, or catch you, or whatever that is. And it's not somebody saving you, and it's not taking away from your independence. It's just being a partnership, just as you would have to be for them. It can't be one person fixing the other or saving the other or being somebody's therapist all the time.
It's such a balance as well, isn't it? Especially,
Yeah.
you know, that a lot of the people who listen to this podcast, for example, will struggle with like codependency and
Yeah.
trauma bonds and all of these things, where it's like that over reliance, and their goal is often to be super reliant and just rely on themselves, not have to trust anyone else. And then we're like, well, actually, you've then got to figure out how much is like the normal amount, or the healthy amount, that's a better word, to rely on someone, and what is the healthy amount to, like you say, to be that independent person. But there's just that balance between the strong independent woman and the woman who is the part of you that is vulnerable and needs a relationship. And I use the word needs, you know.
Yeah, and I do think we've almost come so far into a space where like it feels a bit dirty to admit you want a relationship, or you need a relationship. Like it's almost like goes against the grain of being an independent woman. But people need connection. People need, it's not always saying that you have to want to be in a relationship, or you have to want to find that right now or wherever. But it's people need connection. I think, to go back to your point of what you were sort of just saying with that balance, I also think it's the difference of having boundaries and barriers. So like barriers, I think, are the walls you put up to keep yourself from being vulnerable. And usually when we're doing that, we're actually keeping out the people who it could potentially work with, and instead are kind of inviting in the people who aren't good for us, because really we're protecting ourselves from falling in love, or from being vulnerable, or from having that, well, from sort of getting deeply hurt by somebody who could mean something. And I think boundaries, and this is something I had to learn, are the things that you put in place to know that you'll be okay no matter what. But part of those boundaries are letting the right people in, and being able to trust people, and being able to rely on people just as you rely on yourself.
And knowing that you can walk away, you can stand back up, you can go again. Like that's my thing, like get up and I go again. It's not like I don't feel anything. Okay, ready for the next question?
Yeah, hit me.
Love can be one of the most powerful experiences, as well as the most painful. Oh, it goes between the two. How do you navigate, and how do you keep yourself on track when it throws you off?
That's such an interesting one. I think I'm probably going to answer it from the space I was when I was going through my own like little mini journey, and learning to kind of be secure on my own and not rely on that constant external validation. But I think part of the biggest learning curve for me then, you have to start to choose happiness over the person who's treating you badly. If you're sort of happy as Larry and you start dating somebody, and actually all this things keep coming, start coming up again, like they're not texting, or the anxiety, or the, it's not feeling good, or, the dates are good, but actually all the time in between is horrible. You have to choose happiness and trust that it is okay to walk away, and lean into the fact that you will be all right, as you just said, and kind of almost have a bigger picture. Like I actually had a sort of a vision board that I like put everything on that I'd love my life to be like. And when I felt myself going down the same rabbit hole, I was like, no, this situation now is not going to get me that.
I love that,
good.
because I one of the methods that I've used with myself when eyes and focus on someone who's ultimately unavailable, but you're in that phase of being afraid of letting go, like you say. And I certainly have clients who so openly afraid of letting go for, you know, one of the podcast. And one of the questions that I pose to them, but also to myself, is like, basically, are you willing to exchange this person for your happiness? Because that's what's happening, right? You have to exchange this person for your happiness, and it needs to be with intent. There's allowed to be sadness, you're allowed to be afraid, but there does have to be an exchange, because you don't know, this is the thing, you don't know what's next. So much more is next.
And again, it goes back to trusting that is out there, and trusting that you will be okay no matter what. Like, the worst case scenario is you go back to exactly where you were at the beginning, right?
And sometimes it's just like say if I'm sat here, say if at the moment I was in one of those states where I'd lost myself and stuck on someone, and they're out doing whatever they're doing, ultimately I'm still sat here with you. You know, I'm still here with you. My current moment is safe, I'm good, but our mind just, it's wild, isn't it? Absolutely wild.
It jumps and it jumps. And also I think it still comes back to that thing of, like, almost that desperation to find your person, so you feel like everything's going to be fixed. And I think when you're in that space, you forget who you're talking to or dating or whatever. They become like this sort of dream where all your hopes and self-esteem and dreams of your future are pinned on that one person. It's almost not even about them. It's about you kind of needing it to work, because you need everything else to fall into place and to be fixed. So it becomes this, like, sort of desperation around that one individual who you probably don't even really like.
It's the dream. I remember the guy, he talked about this date we were going to go on. It was like my dream date. What a bastard. He hit me with my dream date. He knew what he was doing as well. But anyway, you know, let it go. And it became about this date. It became in my head about this frigging date that didn't happen, and the dream of this date, because it was my date. It was my dream date. How dare you? Anyway, transpired. All he did is he placed himself in my dream date. And I had to take him out of that and replace it with, I don't know who. I mean, I can do it myself. But I just ended up replacing it with this, you know, you and I, we always talk about feeling, and how do I want to feel that day? And that, you know, the dream, I didn't have to let go of the dream. Just had to take myself out of it.
And do you know what? That was actually a really interesting part of kind of what I had to, you know, when we go back to kind of reframing everything, and you've almost got to reprogram your mind, your body, how you've been kind of conditioned to respond. So a big part for me was was learning to feel what it was like to be loved and to get excited about relationship and to feel safe. You know, that was a big part of my journey, because I'd never felt like that. So I had to kind of call it in almost, you know. And then when that became my baseline, I was far less interested in messing about with people who gave me the opposite feeling.
Exactly. And one of the most exciting things I see myself doing now is just walking away from people, even people though where I don't know what the outcome could be. Like, I walk away before I know, and that's the bit that I think can be quite scary. It's like, but what if? How do you know? Because we know. Because the more you've got your intuition, because there are red flags, because it is really clear, because the conversation is shallow, whatever it, you know, it's whatever there.
I've got a question for you. So, as a pattern, I tend to see.
Stop hosting my podcast, please.
Sorry, no, I just suddenly thought, like,
Go on.
I'm going to turn the tables here. No, but I've got with the pattern, like, I see, like, a lot of my clients, there is far more of the what if. It's what if it works though? Don't I need to give it another chance? Whereas from what I've seen, guys and men tend to be a lot more kind of almost brutal in like, no, I know it's not right, I'm going to walk away, no, they're not the one, no, da, 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 da. Do you think that's sort of true? Is that what you see?
Oh, do you know what? Do I see that? 90% of the people where I have taken note of what they do, I was interested in, they were avoidant. They
Okay.
were avoidant.
Yeah.
So yes, that is what I've seen.
Yeah.
I think it's true that secure people can make a secure decision.
Yeah.
You know, they, like you say, they feel safe in their body, their nervous system, they're regulated. They're probably, because of that, more in touch with their intuition. They're
Yeah.
more in touch with if something doesn't feel right, if someone's behaving in a way like they don't feel desperately like they have to hold on, they're okay with being single. So I guess on the one hand, a secure person is likely to say,
Yeah.
you know, I'm not going to stick in something that doesn't feel right, without making it about self-esteem or worrying that the girl's going to go and meet someone else.
Yeah.
And an avoidant person, well, they're most likely going to leave as soon. I always think, I remember this one guy, we had this night where it was like when things went to like another level. I can't really describe it. It was like we'd been dating for like a couple of months and something went to another level this one night. It was almost like the night where I thought this would be when we decide we're going to be together.
Yeah.
And the next day you couldn't make it up that he was basically done. And I figured from that point, he hadn't decided, I don't like Carly anymore, we've got too close. It's the same way we recognize a feeling of unsafe. It was a feeling that it gave him that made him say,
Yeah.
we're done. That feeling of intimacy, closeness, we're done. So I think it just, and I ended up going off in another spiral, but yeah, it's so interesting, isn't it?
Yeah, it really, really is. And also on that note as well, what I do see some clients is doing is like when they almost know a bit and have kind of like done a bit of work, then they can start spotting, you know, when their partner actually does have a fear of intimacy, or perhaps something has happened in their past or their childhood or whatever, or they've had an experience that has made them the way they are. It's then a little bit of a battle, you know, to make sure you're not going down the route of, okay, well, this is the excuse. I know that actually we are right together. So if I do a bit more work, I can convince him that it is safe.
I guess like the thing is I'm kind of going down this avoidant and anxious dance, but it's that moment where things really, really break down, because in that moment is when they're both triggering each other's biggest wound, right? The avoidant person is now needing that space. The anxious person now can't have the space, and that's the moment it all breaks down. So if and when it could work, it would be a case of communication. It would be a case of space, in like the healthy way, you know. But it's just, is the anxious person able to have the space, and is the avoidant person able to have the conversation?
Well, that is and I think a lot of the time the answer is no, rather than yes, just because,
unless they've individually been doing their own work and they
no,
also don't forget, like, especially with avoidant, you can be temporarily avoidant. You know, you could have had a really bad breakup and for the moment you're not available, but it doesn't mean that. I'm not saying wait for your
I was gonna say, it's just about to be like, hang on, this doesn't mean you hang about
it
for them
doesn't
to
mean you
go
wait
for
for
it.
them or hang out. It doesn't mean that in any way, because they're not ready right now, and that's fair enough, and that's okay. Imagine if we all just communicated and spoke about our wounds and our pain and our vulnerability, and we knew our attachment styles.
But you'd have to know.
We need to do something on this, because we need to ask you your last question and like wrap up.
Oh yeah, sorry, I know. Like we could talk for hours. Could we
I
also
know.
had about 5 more questions in my head that I could have just asked you.
How hard is it? Maybe we need to do something on this.
Yeah.
Back to the podcast. Do you remember we're doing that? I forgot.
Yeah.
Okay, so I love this question. You get to go back to any age and teach yourself a lesson about love. You're not allowed to say that you wouldn't change a thing or that you have no regrets. What would be your lesson in love?
Oh my God, I am definitely not a person who would say they have no regrets. I have many. I would, to be honest, I think my biggest regrets are around how little I've respected myself at points.
Oh my God, you
Um,
did say that because you've just given me so many flashbacks.
I know, I think we probably both know what we're talking about. And
Wow.
that is, anything from chasing somebody, the sort of physical side of things. So I would go back probably early 20s and say, you are lovable, it will be okay. Have some respect and slow down.
Yeah,
You've got to respect yourself.
that would be a lesson for me, actually. That's such a good one. Do you know the book that I always think if I'd read it at 20, let's say 21,
Mm,
it would have helped me to, maybe I wouldn't have picked up my self-worth from it, but I would have
mm,
perhaps saved myself some respect, is He's Just Not That Into You.
yeah.
I did not, I just made up every excuse in my head. I convinced
Mm.
myself. I just couldn't see it.
But would you, if you'd have read it, would you have taken it on board
Well, I
at
guess
that time?
I don't know, but it's certainly a book that really hit home when I
Mm,
read it. I read it sort of later in my 20s, and it definitely did hit home. It's definitely one of those ones where I was like,
mm,
ah, crap, they were
yeah.
never into me.
Yeah, and I know I've got books like that as well, and I've actually gone back and read them when I've been older, or have been kind of experiencing something differently, and they've all hit home where they needed to. So I am almost a big believer in, like, something, or you listen to something, or something resonates to you at the time it should. And that's why, like, I always say to people who are doing consult calls or things like that, there is a reason why you're here. If this is your time, you have to jump and you have to do, because otherwise it's just going to go round and round in circles. But if you don't feel ready, then come back when you are.
Mm. And do you ever notice as well, like if you're watching stuff or listening or reading,
Mm,
you always get the same message?
yeah.
Like I remember for me, I see my journey really going in like these, I guess, like stages so far, which is first learning about happiness,
Mm,
then was learning about self-esteem and self-love, then was attachment styles, and then was all the
mm,
abandonment stuff that I'm doing,
yeah.
much more like in my, like personally and professionally.
Yeah.
And I could have read the same book, when I got to the self-love stage, and
Mm,
everything was then talking about self-love. Or sometimes if I'm reading about, I don't know, energy or something, all of a sudden everything else
yeah.
will mention the 7 chakras or something. And I'm just like, yeah, there's something in it. Obviously it's that you're more aware of it, but it's what you're picking up and what you're ready to hear at that time.
Yeah, definitely. Because also, if you just started reading about, like, all the kind of work you're doing now on abandonment and things like that, like right at the beginning, it wouldn't have hit you, because you didn't have the level of awareness to be able to kind of bring it in and learn from it. It would
Definitely.
have been like, oh no, that's not me, whatever.
Yeah,
Or,
that's it.
oh no, that's fine.
And also like each level you just sort of like go this like bit deeper with
Mm,
yourself. I mean, I guess that's if you're doing the work with yourself as well, which I know that
mm.
we're always interested in. But yeah, love that lesson to
Oh,
have more respect, self-respect.
yeah, have a bit of respect for yourself.
So where can people find you? Obviously I will link and everything, but where can they?
Yes. So I say, I probably the most obvious place is Instagram, where I usually post kind of every other day, but people tend to get in touch a lot in DMs on there. And my Instagram is the compatibility.coach. Or there's my website, which is the compatibilitycoach.co.uk. There's loads of information on there, just like about my story, or how we could work together, or kind of courses that I've got coming out and things like that. So they're probably the two main places.
Love that. Well, thank you very much.
Pleasure, my lovely.
And we will keep everyone in the loop where we're going to have more conversations. That was so good.
Yes, I know. I loved it.